All right, it's May 12th, 2023, 10:02 p.m. My name is Kessie Ian Anderson. Welcome back for part 3 to the report from Iron Mountain. Part 2 was removed from YouTube because of medical misinformation, so you can find that on Rumble. I'll put the link down below. I also have a strike on my account, so at some point they are going to remove my account. So if you haven't, feel free to check me out on Rumble at the link below and subscribe. My time here, I think, is short, unless I super censor myself, which is very hard to do. So as a recap, Bill Cooper told us to read through this to find out the government's disposition towards war. Basically, we find out that they cannot get rid of war because that is what our society is based on, is war. And that goes in further as I read sections 3 and 4 to the report to Iron Mountain.
Get up! Get on your feet!
Here we go. Section 3. Disarming scenarios. Scenarios, as they have come to be called, are hypothetical constructions of future events. Inevitably, they are composed of varying proportions of established fact, reasonable inference, and more or less inspired guesswork. Those which have been suggested as model procedures for effectuating international arms control and eventual disarmament are necessarily imaginative. Although closely reasoned, in this respect they resemble the war games analysis of the Rand Corporation, which they share a common conceptual origin. All such scenarios that have been seriously put forth imply a dependence on bilateral or multilateral agreement between the great powers. In general, they call for a progressive phasing out of gross armaments, military forces, weapons, and weapons technology, coordinated with elaborate matching procedures of verification, inspection, and machinery for the settlement of international disputes. It should be noted that even proponents of unilateral disarmament qualify their proposals with an implied requirement of reciprocity, very much in the manner of a scenario of graduated response in nuclear war. The advantage of unilateral initiative lies in its political value as an expression of good faith, as well as in its diplomatic function as a catalyst for formal disarmament negotiations. So if you don't know what they're saying, unilateral disarmament means you have two nations at war with each other. One just says, hey, out of the goodness of our heart, we're going to disarm. To me, that's insanity. Anybody who comes to me against Second Amendment and cries, how many more children have to die? Well, I won't answer that for the sake of this, but I have an answer for it, but you will not like it. Second Amendment is the only thing that keeps us from being the absolute and 100% slaves. At least with my gun, I can pretend I'm not 100% slave at the moment, even though I still am. I at least have that comfort, that little lioness blanket and peanuts, that I'm not a total slave. So you try to disarm me, that's when we're going to have a very bad time. And that's why the government doesn't dare go down that path. They're going to at some point, but it's not going to go well. The READ model for disarmament, developed by the Research Program on Economic Adjustments to Disarmament, is a typical of these scenarios. It is a 12-year program divided into 3-year stages. Each stage includes a separate phase of reduction of armed forces, cutbacks of weapons production, inventories and foreign military bases, development of international inspection procedures and control conventions, and the building up of a sovereign international disarmament organization. It anticipates a net matching decline in U.S. defense expenditures of only somewhat more than half the 1965 level, but a necessary redeployment of some 5/6 of the defense-dependent labor force. The economic implications assigned by their authors to various disarmament scenarios diverge widely. The more conservative models, like that cited above, emphasize economic as well as military prudence in postulating elaborate fail-safe disarmament agencies, which themselves require expenditures substantially substituting for those of the displaced war industries. Such programs stress the advantages of the smaller economic adjustment entailed. Others emphasize, on the contrary, the magnitude, and the opposite advantages, of the savings to be achieved from disarmament. One widely read analysis estimates the annual cost of the inspection function of general disarmament throughout the world is only between 2 and 3% of current military expenditures. Both types of plan tend to deal with the anticipated problem of economic reinvestment only in the aggregate. We have seen no proposed disarmament sequence that correlates the phasing out of specific kinds of military spending with specific new forms of substitute spending. Without examining disarmament scenarios in greater detail, we may characterize them with these general comments. Given genuine agreement of intent among the great powers, the scheduling of arms control and elimination presents no inherently insurmountable procedural problems. Any of several proposed sequences might serve as the basis for multilateral agreement or for the first step in unilateral arms reduction. No major power can proceed with such a program, however, until it has developed an economic conversion plan fully integrated with each phase of disarmament. No such plan has yet been developed in the United States. Furthermore, disarmament scenarios, like proposals for economic conversion, make no allowance for the non-military functions of war in modern societies, and offer no surrogate for these necessary functions. One partial exception is a proposal for the unarmed forces of the United States, which we will consider in Section 6. Page 30. Section 4. War and Peace as Social Systems. We have dealt only sketchily with proposed disarmament scenarios and economic analysis. But the reason for our seemingly casual dismissal of so much serious and sophisticated work lies in no disrespect for its competence. It is rather a question of relevance. To put it plainly, all these programs, however detailed and well-developed, are abstractions. The most carefully reasoned disarmament sequence inevitably reads more like the rules of a game or a classroom exercise in logic than like a prognosis of real events in the real world. This is as true of today's complex proposals as it was of the Abbé de Saint-Pierre's plan for perpetual peace in Europe 250 years ago. Some essential element has clearly been lacking in all of these schemes. One of our first tasks was to try to bring this missing quality into definable focus, and we believe we have succeeded in doing so. We find that at the heart of every peace study we have examined, from the modest technological proposal, e.g., to convert a poison gas plant to the production of a socially useful equivalent, to the most elaborate scenario for universal peace in our time, lies one common fundamental misconception. It is the source of the miasma of unreality surrounding such plans. It is the incorrect assumption that war, as an institution, is subordinate to the social systems it is believed to serve. This misconception, although profound and far-reaching, is entirely comprehensible. Few social cliches are so unquestioningly accepted as the notion that war is an extension of diplomacy, or of politics, or of the pursuit of economic objectives. If this were true, it would be wholly appropriate for economists and political theorists to look on the problems of transition to peace as essentially mechanical or procedural, as indeed they do, treating them as logistic corollaries of the settlement of national conflicts of interest. If this were true, there'd be no real substance to the difficulties of transition. For it is evident that even in today's world there exists no conceivable conflict of interest, real or imaginary, between nations or between social forces within nations that cannot be resolved without recourse to war. If such resolution were assigned a priority of social value, and if this were true, the economic analyses and disarmament proposals we have referred to, plausible and well-conceived as they may be, would not inspire, as they do, an inescapable sense of indirection. The point is that the cliché is not true, and the problems of transition are indeed substantive rather than merely procedural. Although is used as an instrument of national and social policy, the fact that a society is organized for any degree of readiness for war supersedes its political and economic structure. War itself is the basic social system, within which other secondary modes of social organization conflict or conspire. It is the system which has governed most human societies of record as it is today. Once this is correctly understood, the true magnitude of the problems entailed in a transition to peace, itself a social system, but without precedent except in a few simple pre-industrial societies, becomes apparent. At the same time, some of the puzzling superficial contradictions of modern societies can then be readily rationalized. The unnecessary size and power of the world war industry, the preeminence of the military establishment in every society, whether open or concealed, the exemption of military or paramilitary institutions from the accepted social and legal standards of behavior required elsewhere in the society, the successful operation of the armed forces and the armaments producers entirely outside the framework of each nation's economic ground rules, these and other ambiguities closely associated with the relationship of war to society are easily clarified once the priority of war-making potential as the principal structuring force in society is accepted. Economic systems, political philosophies, and corpora jure serve and extend the war system, not vice versa. So what they're arguing in this is they're saying that war is not just a facet of society. War is our society. Everything else is subservient to that. And we don't even know, in terms of the military-industrial complex, how many deals have been made behind the scenes, how many laws have been thrown to the side, relegated to the dustbin, or just hidden to acquiesce to the war machine. Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Boston Dynamics. We don't know how much wiggle room these people have been given. I mean, it's I hate to do a Star Wars cliche, but it is the Empire and the Death Star that sad to say, most of our technological innovations come from war machines being repurposed for a public. Why can't it be the other way around? Well, I will argue it's based on money. If you research Mayer Rothschild, Amschel Mayer, who changed his name to Rothschild, if you look at all the bankers, when the Federal Reserve and all the banks and all that, every war has been a banker's war. It's all based on money. Even this, they try to sell the lie to us that it's production. Oh, it's production, it's productivity. We got to have the slaves, we got to have the animal farm work its ass off. That's how you actually measure GDP. It's nonsense. Supply and demand, the invisible hand. No, it's all scarcity that they've lied to us about through the media. It's all lies. It's all economics. It's all interest rates. It's all usury. It's all nonsense. We don't need it. There's definitely going to be, at some point, a society without the dollar. I don't know how. I don't know where it comes about, but that's the only way I see peace, is attacking Judeo-Satanism's greatest thing, the dollar, the energy source of the money. So what these people are struggling with is they have nothing to go by, because we've always been at war for whatever reason, at the behest of some douchebag at the top, some king, some pope, some banker, some politician, some president, some religion controlling all of it, some organization masquerading as puppets, lying that they are not religious representatives, perpetrating all of it, blackmail, and more. It must be emphasized that the precedence of a society's war-making potential over its other characteristics is not the result of the threat presumed to exist at any one time from other societies. This is the reverse of the basic situation. Threats against the national interest are usually created or accelerated to meet the changing needs of the war system. Only in comparatively recent times has it been considered politically expedient to euphemize war budgets as defense requirements. The necessity for governments to distinguish between aggression bad and defense good has been has been a byproduct of rising literacy and rapid communication. The distinction is tactical only, a concession to the growing inadequacy of ancient war organizing political rationales. Wars are not caused by international conflicts of interest. Proper logical sequence would make it more often accurate to say that war-making societies require and thus bring about such conflicts. Those are infinitely true words. Infinitely true. The capacity of a nation to make war expresses the greatest social power it can exercise. War-making, active or contemplated, is a matter of life and death on the greatest scale subject to social control. It should therefore hardly be surprising that the military institutions in each society claim its highest priorities. Again, war-making, active or contemplated, is a matter of life and death on the greatest scale subject to social control. Well, they don't want to give up the war machine without having active control measures in place, and that's where we're going with this AI. That's where we're going with AI. That's where we're going with CBDC. That's where we're going with track target ID. That's where we're going with this. They can't just live and let go. They can't do it. The powers that be, the elites, have to have the slaves under a microscope at all times in a peace system. And part of that is, whether you want to accept it or not, the disarmament of us is coming. They're going to try. I don't know how they're going to orchestrate it. They've been currying favor with the Munchausen moms by staging their false flags nonstop. All right, to continue. We find further that most of the confusion surrounding the myth that war-making is a tool of state policy stems from a general misapprehension of the functions of war. In general, these are conceived as to defend a nation from military attack by another, or to deter such an attack, to defend or advance a national interest, economic, political, ideological, to maintain or increase a nation's military power for its own sake. These are the visible or ostensible functions of war. If there were no others, the importance of the war establishment in each society might in fact decline to the subordinate level it is believed to occupy, and the elimination of war would indeed be the procedural matter that the disarmament scenario suggests. But there are other, broader, more profoundly felt functions of war in modern societies. It is these invisible or implied functions that maintain war readiness as the dominant force in our societies, and it is the unwillingness or inability of the writers of disarmament scenarios and reconversion plans to take them into account that has so reduced the usefulness of their work, and that has made it seem unrelated to the world we know. So at least these guys are just trying to be honest brokers. They're just saying everybody else looked at war with apprehension. They didn't call a spade and say that the war machine is literally our society. The military-industrial complex is in total control. Big Pharma is an extension of that, all being controlled by the CEOs out of Israel, is my argument. If you can present to me a better one, I'm more than willing to hear it. Those that aren't part of that are blackmailed by it, or paid off by it. You are either bribed or blackmailed. That's why the war machine will continue on until they have their sick oneness of God.